Hello, I'm mischievous Mark Ginocchio, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, Amazing Fantasy number 15, although I might have overpaid for it, it seems, and all of the Amazing Spider-Man annuals, which I did not overpay for because I got them years ago, but they don't count. Even if Dan got them even longer ago than I did, they do not count.
Well, I'm Dapper Dan Gavastan, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals, which, yes, I did get before Mark. I want to be clear about that and on the record. And as such, they do count, which means vis-a-vis, I finished my Amazing Spider-Man collection before Mark did. But for me, Amazing Fantasy number 15 remains a fantasy, even if Mark paid too much for it, which he didn't. I mean, yes, in all semblances of things, you paid for 20-some pieces of paper a lot of money. But, for the sort of like Pyrrhic victory that you have over me, I think the dollar amount was worth every penny.
All right. Well, you're making me feel better, Dan, so that's important. Well, welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe. Thanks for joining us for this review episode of Amazing Spider-Man Volume 7.
Yeah, and universe is probably the right thing to tag onto this one because we're going back to space. Today on the show, Mark and I are going to be discussing Amazing Spider-Man Volume 7, number 15. It feels like it's been a while since we've done one of these because it has been. It's been 3 weeks since the last issue, that last issue being 978, which means this one is Legacy issue number 979. The issue was written by Joe Kelly, who did not take a break during that time because we got Radioactive Spider-Man number 1. The cover features artwork by Pepe Larraz and Marte Gracia. The interiors are by guest artist Emilio Laiso, colors by Marcio Menyz, Marte Gracia, and Erick Arciniega, and of course, letters by VC's Joe Caramagna. This issue was first released on November 5th, 2025. Mark, here's with a recap of the events of Amazing Spider-Man Volume 7, Number 15, Legacy 979.
The comic opens with a dream sequence of Peter reuniting with Aunt May before she burns up in an inferno, which segues perfectly to Rocket Raccoon bursting into Peter's room, waking him up from his nightmare before detailing him about their next adventure in space. Rocket mentions that late-stage capitalism is a rigged game, which prompts Peter to ask, what did he do now? I have to imagine Rocket promised free bus service and maybe 1 or 2 government-owned grocery stores, which naturally has every 1%er promising to leave, well, outer space, I guess, in this context, but I guess I could be wrong. Anyway, the issue is that Rocket is unable to pay back his debt to Skrid City, a space colony that's overseen by Dinwicket. So Peter decides to continue his virtuous streak by evening things up, or maybe he's just going to be a big dork. You decide. To make things right, he will have to fight in a wrestling match, which I don't think he's done since 1962. Dan may need to be reminded of that since it happened in an issue of a comic he doesn't own.
Oh, burn.
Ooh. The fight comes against Betty, not Brant, a giant Rancor-looking monster that would definitely kill Peter if not for his exciting new costume he acquired from Xanto. However, little does Peter know, the costume is still alive, and Betty is quite unhappy about a 2-on-1 fight. This revelation brings forward a new crisis of conscience for Peter, who wants the living suit disabled a la Factory Reset. Unfortunately, he timed that right in front of Betty's open mouth, so into the belly of the beast he goes. During the reset, Peter and the alien suit's memories cross their streams, leading to all kinds of confusion. We also learn more about Hellgate and the threat he made to Peter upon blasting him across the universe. The threat, which was explicitly that he would turn all that Peter cherishes into powder if he ever returns to Earth, explains Peter's newfound obsession with getting stronger and his avoidance of returning home. When his suit's reset is done, it reintroduces itself as Glitch. They share apologies before Glitch gives Peter a real, non-living suit this time to help him in his fight against Betty. The rest of Peter's team joins in on the brawl as Rocket attempts to settle with Dinwicket. The rules might not be on Rocket's side, but he essentially retorts, "What? Did you expect me to fold? Like I'm the Democrats actually winning a PR battle against a bunch of incompetent autocrats?" I don't know. Let's ask Chuck Schumer. Anyway, Glitch works out the compromise with Betty, and the heroes win another round against all odds. That brings us back to the ship, where Peter and Xanto argue about morality and their deal to make him stronger, which Rocket overhears and storms off over. As Peter goes to follow and explain, he is confronted by Raylith. She asks him why he gave up strength for the freedom of another life form, and he said because it was the right thing to do. This prompts her to kiss him and then pull back for not getting his consent first. But Peter is all like, "Listen, lady, I cheated on Shay with Felicia when I was in the same zip code as her. So this definitely doesn't count. Let's make out."
Oh man, Mark, that last joke really got me, and I got to admit, like the level of cringe factor that I had reading the letters page in this issue, where Nick Lowe expresses his like love for lip locking, which I think has been fairly consistent, I guess, across his tenure, and how much he cheers for Peter like
to get lip laid.
Getting some. And I don't know how to feel about that. And it feels like kind of like rage baity stuff for the MJ shippers. But what are you going to do? Mark, let's get into our thoughts on this issue. And I'll just start off by saying I think this is another one of those chapters of spacefaring Spider-Man where it shouldn't work as a Spider-Man comic, and yet Joe Kelly's writing continues to work really hard and does an excellent job of being a Spider-Man comic, despite everything that should paint it as not a Spider-Man comic. And I'm happy to get into why that is, but I'm curious to hear what you think. Is this still read as a Spider-Man comic for two people who have criticized something like Ultimate Spider-Man for not feeling like a Spider-Man comic?
Yeah, no, I think it does. I mean, like, you know, Peter is very clearly at the center here. His actions or inactions are driving all of the conflict and all of, you know, the good and bad of these stories. I mean, like, you know, as much as I'm enjoying this entire run right now, I do feel like these Peter focused issues in space have just a little bit more like heart and soul and character, you know, stakes to them than the Earth stuff with Norman and Ben. I mean, they're also just more straightforward in terms of what's going on. I mean, we, you know, obviously we had a very big emotional discovery in the last Peter issue. This one kind of sets it up as kind of like the adventure of the week, if you will. And, you know, because of that, I think it uses its supporting cast well. I think it uses its featured villain of the issue very well. They're just fun Spider-Man comics, even though they're taking place in space with a lot of characters who either have never typically interacted with Peter or have not existed before this run. But like I think for the most part, they're all kind of well drawn and fun. So let's do it.
Yeah, I thought fun is a really great word for this. This is a funnier comic than I think I've come to expect from this run so far. It's probably what I've expected before this run began, like a kind of jokier, kind of like throw a lot at you Joe Kelly. And I don't mind it here. I don't think that the like jokes landed quite as strong as, you know, some of the other funnier Spider-Man comics did. Like there's no vibrating chair under Joe Robertson,
right?
But which remains like a high water level for me. But like this is a very breezy, lighter tone than the previous Peter comic that we got, and I think it lands that tone really well. This feels like a very kind of classically humored Spider-Man comic. And yeah, I agree. I really like the supporting cast. Rocket, I think, is a great foil to Peter because he doesn't really lead with sincerity. You know, he's kind of very cynical and always has kind of like a secondary plan going, which is definitely not Peter's MO. And so the two of them kind of trading back and forth is sort of like, what are you trying to do? Oh, I'm running the secondary plan over here. I think is quite fun. And even down to like the language that he uses where he's making fun of Peter and calling him like, I don't know if he's calling him like the F-bomb man. It's crossed out, but yeah, all of that has been a lot of fun. And it does the one thing that I think we've criticized so many of these Spidey team ups with, which is they've always lose Peter Parker in it.
Yeah.
Like I think like we even think about like Dan Slott's Volume 3, which is a lot of team ups where Peter Parker just got relegated to the background or having to be saved by someone else. And I don't know if there's a stake that's really high enough here to say like that anybody saved anybody else necessarily. But Peter, I thought drove all of the sort of big decisions in this comic, and that made it really entertaining.
Yeah, like kind of to that last point you made, I think like even like the final exchange between Peter and Rocket over his relationship with Zonto, I thought was like important because like, yeah, we're getting a lot of Peter and it's being driven by Peter, but it's like, it's not all sunshine and rainbows either. I mean, like we're, like he continues to kind of be this moral compass in this comic. And other characters keep commenting on it, his virtuousness versus theirs. And yet, Rocket kind of raises this big question, like, yeah, but at the end of the day, you're siding with someone who tried to imprison us and you treat us as lab rats for your own benefit. So what does that ultimately make? All this talk about, freeing the suit or, doing this or, trying to evening the score for Rocket with Dimwicket and all this kind of stuff. It colors all that with some shades of gray. And I think it's important that we're getting this well-rounded analysis of Peter and what's driving him here. It's not just like, oh, it's Peter and it's about Peter and Peter's so good and Peter is great and Peter is the moral fiber of everything that is Marvel. It's it's what a Spider-Man comic should be, because there are always shades of gray with Spider-Man, even if people try to deny that sometimes.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I also think that like this comic is very like laser targeted in some of the kind of choices it makes in the dialogue on that subject. Like early on, Rocket kind of like throws like a loose boss at Peter, which could be just like a colloquial like friend term, like, yeah, what's up, boss? And Peter's like, I asked you to not call me that, which is like Peter kind of abdicating his role as like some kind of leader amongst the group, which we've seen him do even in just the previous, issue of the story. And then you mentioned it in your recap with a Raelith where she asks him point blank, like, why did you trade power for the freedom of someone else, and in a story that's so explicitly about Peter getting more powerful or more strong to fight Hellgate, or that's the thing he's avoiding, I think these things are all very specifically calculated in the language it's using and the choices that Peter is making along this journey to discover what strength actually means in the face of Hellgate. And I'll add another thing that maybe is not quite as related, but felt very important, especially to topics that you and I have discussed in the past, is the opening of this comic starting with Aunt May, in this sort of flashback that kind of reveals where Peter's head's at, which is to say he's very much would like to get home and see his aunt. And it's interesting too, because like Joe Kelly throws a barb in there too, where she's like, hey, you may have been like a buck, is it a buck short or whatever? You may have been
late $8 short.
$8 short.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the kind of classic criticism of Peter.
Right.
And so like that's on his mind. And the idea of like getting back. And we've long said that we think Aunt May is going to be important to the resolution of this story. And to me, I'm still sticking with that, given that we're in the middle of space and she's still making her presence known here.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, she's important to it. I mean, like, and we'll talk about this sequence maybe a little bit later when we talk about the suit, but even like when, when Peter and the Technarchy suit are having like their little origin story show off and stuff. Like there's a lot of talk about mothers and fathers and maternal figures and paternal figures and the threats that each of them brings. So I think like, this is something that, has been brought up a lot in since the beginning of Joe Kelly's runs. I mean, specifically, who are these characters in Peter's life without his actual parents being around, and and then without Uncle Ben being around, you know what I mean? Like it's clear that Kelly has a fascination with maternal and paternal relationships here, which I don't think we've gotten a heavy dosage of. But do you want to talk a little bit more specifically about Peter and the return home, and just like, the reveal, if you will, about
Hellgate?
Yeah, I mean, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do, but one quick note. I mean, like maybe it deserves more than this, but the art in this issue, guest artist Emilio Laiso. I think we've been very positive on his artwork in the past, but I actually think this is my favorite use of him as a guest artist on this book. He's an Italian artist, and the first thing I thought when I read this comic was this was the exact right comic to bring a European artist on. It really reminded me, especially in a few panels, and with the sort of like many armed character that is kind of like running up the whole like event, Dinwicket, reminded me a lot of like a book like Valerian and Laureline, the sort of like European sci-fi books,
Sure,
that you get, or something like artwork from Mobius, especially even how it's colored with a sort of like softer touch. There's this one close-up panel of that alien's mouth that just like really screamed to me like Mobius or like Valerian, and it turned it into a sort of more fun sci-fi European style adventure with Spidey in the middle of it. And that made this a lot of fun. And I like the sort of flexibility if you're going to bring an artist like that in to like give him a tale that matches is sort of the art style. And it's cool to see Spider-Man in that environment. And I love too that Kelly even wrote like a whole like aside in this issue about Spider-Man being like, I'm good at adapting to my surroundings, which like maybe is more of a commentary on his place in the Marvel line than anything about Peter's character.
right.
But it was enough to sell me on like, hey, here's a like Valerian and the, and Laureline story just with Spider-Man smack in the middle of it.
No, for sure. No, I think the biggest compliment I can give to Laiso's work here was like, I mean, I know this wasn't Pepe Larraz, but despite it being a Larraz cover, I didn't feel like in reading this, I was like, I kept saying to myself, oh man, I just wish this was Larraz. You know what I mean? Like, I think he just more, Laiso more than held his own here and just kept this story moving. And I think it's just important to have like a certain feeling and aesthetic to these space stories right now. And Laiso captured it. What needed to be there for that.
And I got to admit, I love shaggy Peter Parker with the longer hair.
Sure.
Like, like maybe it's just the ultimate Spider-Man like lover in me
right.
that like wants the longer haircut. But like if Peter can return to Earth with a little bit of a longer do, I wouldn't push back.
It's COVID-19 Peter, right? I mean,
That's right. That's right. Yeah. All right, let's talk about the returning home. Beyond the haircut, we get a little bit more information here about like not only this sort of apocalyptic dream that Peter has of Aunt May's death, but we really get like a kind of more clear idea of like what is motivating Peter to not return home, so on and so forth. So, Mark, why don't you like you mentioned a little bit in your recap, but get into this in more detail for me.
Yeah, I mean, we have kind of questioned since this storyline began, like, okay, but what's really keeping Peter in space trying to quote unquote be stronger? Why is he making this deal with Xanto of all people, who, is not a good person and, is likely to betray him again at some point, like it just seems like that's inevitable. And, the reasoning for that is, this explicit threat from Hellgate that, basically if he comes back and isn't capable of beating Hellgate, he's, Hellgate's just going to destroy everyone he loves, which is, I guess, obvious, but like, I don't know, like I think part of me wasn't expecting it to be more than that. So the fact that they were just explicit with it was good enough for me, but your mileage may vary on that, Dan. I don't know. Does your mileage vary on that in terms of the reasoning behind this?
I'm not disappointed in it. I'm just more kind of curious about like how Kelly has like chosen to dole out this information. And not just with this, I feel like there's been a number of instances where he kind of maybe an issue or two later than you would expect to get the information tells you what you may have already been kind of assuming and just kind of nails it down. I feel like that was true during like 8 Deaths, where like we kind of find out a rule about how things were operating kind of a couple issues after we already kind of assumed that to be the case.
Right.
And I don't think he's doing it in a way that makes you feel kind of dumb as a reader, because like that's often been true where I've read something and it's like they go out of their way to kind of make something explicit that you're like, yeah, I understand subtext, I wouldn't call this like making subtext, explicit more than it is just going like, oh, hey, we just chose to reveal this now. And it's not a big reveal. And it's not even made dramatically like a reveal. It's kind of just thrown into a mix of a bunch of other things on the page. And so maybe you and I are the only ones really commenting on this as like any kind of new information.
Yeah.
But it's just an interesting approach.
I guess if I could like no prize this a little bit, I mean, like, and maybe you're compounding one, I don't want to call it a mistake, but like one questionable choice with another. But like, you do have to consider that when Hellgate first shows up and has that confrontation, even though it is a violent confrontation, it's originally colored with like Hellgate kind of being like, oh, I'm almost jovial about it. Like, I'm here for the sport of fighting you because you are a worthy adversary. And it's not until
it is kind of a heel turn. Yeah. Like I wasn't because like, yeah, the read is not quite this apocalyptic.
Right.
Yeah.
But like there clearly is, if you go back to that issue, there clearly is a turning point where Hellgate is like, wait a second, you are not the adversary I thought you were. And now I have to destroy you. Like we've gone from, we've gone from just kind of this like, jovial, silly battle to, Peter versus Moreland. And I think at the time we were kind of like, all right, they're trying to do Moreland part 2, but it's just not there. And I still don't think, even this justifies it but like it adds more context to, I guess, what we saw at the time and why that's actually motivating Peter. Because if it's just, if Peter got punched so hard, he went to the other end of space by this guy, but like this guy is still just like looking for an adversary, is Peter taking it this seriously? You know what I mean? But like now it's like, no, this is very personal. This guy wants everyone around me to be dead because he just wants me to suffer. So I have to find a way to beat him. And it raises the stakes. And like, yeah, we can make that assumption and fill in the gaps, but like, I don't know. I think a part of me is like, we didn't actually fully know just because of how the character was first presented. The character of Hellgate was first presented of us. So it circles the square for me. And like, also not for nothing, like, after, and we said this a lot, especially during the first arc of the Kelly run with the Hobgoblin and the soda and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's kind of nice for a quote unquote mystery to not actually be that much of a mystery. You know what I mean? It's,
agreed.
I'm just like, okay, yeah, like I kind of figured, but thanks for confirming. Now I can go off this information and I'm not like second guessing it and worry, thinking that we're going to get swerved with something outrageous like, No, actually, the reason why I need to get stronger is because the long forgotten
Hellgate selling frozen popsicles.
well, the long forgotten kin of Norman Osborn and Gwen
Yeah.
Stacy are actually working the suit behind the scenes. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like let's just tell a straightforward story and be, and just kind of unlayer it at a reasonable pace. Like, at that.
There's also the fact that not everybody is reading this book as like closely as you and I are, and so blocking something down is a good way to make sure your readership is following along with what you're doing.
But did they say look out, Dan? That is the question.
That's right. Yeah. But it does raise a lot of questions, though. Like, where is Hellgate and what is he doing now?
Yeah.
Like in another version of the story, you'd expect like Norman and Ben to be on Earth watching this guy just raise hell and not knowing how to face it. And Peter needs to come to the rescue. But Hellgate is basically non-existent. Is he, he's threatening Peter, like, don't come back to Earth or I'll destroy everybody you love, because he's doing what in the meantime?
Right.
Right. Like, is he feeding on the planet Galactus style and we're not seeing him? Like, I'm not saying this is any kind of like negative on the story, because I'm sure something is happening.
Yeah.
But it is curious, and also curious that, like, I mean, I'm sure he knows who Peter is through some sort of cosmic thing, but he's not going after the other Spider-Men, that are posing as Peter.
I mean,
right?
this character was clearly set up as having some kind of personal connection to Peter Parker, and why that's the case, I hope we find out more explicitly, and it's not hand waved away. It's just like, it's comics, folks. But like, that's why, like, even like, what else is he doing? Is he trying to feed on the planet? Is he trying to destroy? I don't think those are, like, this character was set up where his motivations was trying to test Peter and his strength. You know what I mean? And maybe that's just all that it is. You know what I mean? Like, there is nothing else to it. He doesn't want to dominate the world. He doesn't want to rule over people. He doesn't want to kill all the spiders. He just wants Peter to be a worthy adversary, and he wasn't. So why? You know what I mean? Like, and
he's the predator or whatever.
Yeah. But he's the predator just for Peter. There is no, like, he doesn't seem to want anything or anyone else. And, again, like, I think that's going to be the ultimate payoff for this storyline, is why Peter, and what does this also have to do with his past and his mother? And I mean, they refer to Hellgate as his father, and like, I did have a moment where I was like, are we gonna have some kind of like wacky, like, this is like
Richard Parker stuff?
This is some kind of Richard Parker timeline thing. Who knows? I mean,
please God, no. But it is interesting. Like, like, I mean, it could be nothing, or it could be just how the Glitch sees the role of a male father figure,
as a threat,
but it is an interesting thing that they set up the sort of Aunt May as the mother figure and Hellgate as the father figure on the page, and something like that does not seem accidental to do something like that. And then, like, just kind of like circling back around all the Hellgate stuff, going to the end of the book where you have and we'll talk about our feelings on the makeout scene in a moment, but the implied element there is that Peter is busy saying what he's doing is being on a vacation, but meanwhile, this sort of cosmic destiny is sort of still calling for him, whether he wants to embrace it or not, because Nicodemu, whoever the hell Nicodemu is there watching, translucently, in the ship as Peter makes out with someone. I don't know what to make of that. And I also didn't know that it was Nicodemu at first, because I felt like this was a pretty like hard color palette shift for that character who I barely know anyway. But on second reading, I was like, that design looks way too familiar. This isn't just any random alien. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but my read is just like that his cosmic fate is awaiting him, whether he wants to embrace it or not.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add to that, but that, so.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about, I mentioned Glitch, the Technarchy suit. Mark, I think I already asked you about this. Do you have any sort of history with or knowledge about the Technarchy characters from New Mutants or anything like that?
I mean, outside of reading a few select issues of New Mutants from the 80s and knowing like, oh yeah, that looks like, I forget the character's name.
Warlock?
Warlock, thank you. That looks like Warlock from New Mutants, but I don't have much beyond that. Just a visual recognition of, oh, they're kind of the same, aren't they? We're of the same race.
Yeah, and I think they do a pretty decent job of just kind of giving you like a brief glimpse into like all you need to know about the character, which is it's a sort of like hive mind thing.
Yeah.
And the greatest insult, you can get is to be basically kicked out of the hive mind. And this particular suit was left drifting in space, and I think the sort of like comparison to the symbiotes like starts there too. I mean, like the symbiotes also hive mind culture, and you've got the Venom symbiote, which is kind of abandoned on Battle World, and Spider-Man finds it and picks it up and discovers it's a living thing. And to me, that was the strongest element of this story in regards to connecting it back to Spider-Man's past, like that he reacts to having a living suit in the way that he does, suggests a character that has learned the lesson of, hey, power is great, but power is not worth subjugating another creature to my will, lest it decide to get angry at me and then spawn its own franchise, which competes with my own. I mean, we don't want to have a glitch cinematic universe over the next decade.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah, I don't know. Your reaction to any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously you're reading this and, like you're getting the analogies and comparisons to the original symbiote. Do we need necessarily to play the hits here? I don't know, but like you were saying earlier, A, not everyone reads this book as closely as we do, and B, not everyone has been reading as long as we do. And like, we really haven't had unless I'm misremembering. I mean, I think like the last like, someone new is possessed by the symbiote was, the Red Goblin storyline, which is now approaching almost 10 years old at this point. So, you know what I mean? Like we got, a whole new generation of readers coming into this. So, like good to keep it churning, I guess,
Well, let's be explicit about what you're saying. You mean within the pages of Amazing Spider-Man? Because
correct. Yeah.
Someone new wearing the symbiote suit is a daily occurrence in the symbiote books.
No, I know that, but not everyone again, like not everyone is us, Dan. Not everyone who reads.
Not everyone is buying every symbiote book because at one point they originated in the Spider-Man universe.
Yeah, I mean, like I buy Punisher because Punisher was started in Spider-Man. I'm sure there are some people who are like, wait, what?
I did that this week with the Cloak or Dagger book.
Yeah, I got Cloak or Dagger. It was like, why would you do that? Because Spider-Man connections. Duh.
That being said, the Carnage book that ends this week has been excellent. So if you haven't read Eddie Brock Carnage, I can't recommend it enough.
Okay.
There we go. Just selling more symbiote books. Yeah, look, I don't mind them playing the hits. And I think the thing that makes it most interesting to me is the kind of where it ends off, which is, I mean, there's the obvious idea of like, okay, like, like the trade-off of power, and like, what are you using to gain that power? Is it a living thing? And that's very like, it's cool to see Peter reflect on that. But there's an interesting beat with Xanto where we learn that Glitch willingly, like basically gave himself over to science to Xanto to make something of his life. And that for now, Glitch is enjoying his freedom, but Xanto says like that could change at any moment. These creatures are not bound to the morality of humanity.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. I don't really quite know what it's implying. Is it implying there's going to be like a backstab or like, Xanto has some sort of like ace up his sleeve to free himself, or whatever it is. I don't think it needs to be read into, but it is interesting to sort of like challenge Peter's motives, or not motives, but like his prescription that what he thinks is moral should be applied to the sort of standards of every other being that he's saving, quote unquote.
Well, I think it ties in, again, not to go back to what I was saying earlier, but I think it ties into even the Peter's morality in question via Rocket at the end. I think like this book is doing a really good job of, both establishing Peter's virtue, but also establishing Peter's complexity, and that not, like there are some creatures out there that just have a simpler view of morality than Peter does. You know what I mean? Like it's, I mean, Peter's entire essence of being a Spider-Man is very complex in nature. It's, he was given a gift, and, he chose to use it poorly, but like the sin that he actually committed in reality, it was the sin of doing nothing. It wasn't he didn't steal from anybody. He didn't kill somebody. Yeah. He wasn't, but it led to this awful, tragic outcome for him. So it colors his entire worldview, but it's like, it's not simple. You know what I mean?
Well, not only that, but his solution for his sin is to basically become a costumed vigilante,
right? And
flout the laws and take justice into his own hands.
Yeah,
his own perspective of justice. But you want to blame the Punisher for killing people, but like they're all doing it to some degree of. In that regard.
So like, that's why, like, I feel like Xanto draws it out, but then like Rocket kind of brings it home. It's that, we're in this comic where on its face, we seem to be constantly being reminded what a good person Peter is. And I think he is a good person. I don't think that
absolutely.
I don't think that is what's an actual question here. But the thing is, like, he is a good person because we as members of the human race with an understanding of the human condition see the virtue in him. But there are other characters in this story who are not part of the human race, and they see the virtue and morality in it through a different lens. So it's like, even with Peter doing what seems to be the right thing, and which seems to be amazing so many of these characters, including one who starts making out with him, which I know we'll talk about in a second, at the end of the day, he's not necessarily the embodiment of virtue to everybody, because they all have their different codes, including this technarchy, including Glitch, like Glitch might just be
including Betty, which like I found interesting, because like that monster, when freed, we are told, wants to renegotiate their labor policies on the planet instead of engaging in further violence, which to me feels almost like this funny capper on issue 13 story,
right?
Oh, here we go. Like even the monster of this story is engaging in that sort of jurisprudence, as you would put it, Mark.
It's like Andrew Cuomo wanting to negotiate labor policies now after losing.
Okay, all
right. I had to do it.
Let it die. Let it die, Mark. It's okay. You've lived in New York all this time and probably were subjected to all these ads. I'll let you hang on to the sort of Cuomo assault as it is. All right, let's get to this final.
I guess. Okay. Anyway.
Oh God. I did not mean it that way.
Up. All right. Anyway, keep going.
Okay. So, speaking of kissing or maybe inappropriately touching.
Is Rayliff Italian? Okay, I'm done. All
right. Yeah, that's the alien species. A subtle commentary from Joe Kelly calling them wretched. And anyway, now what are you going to do? Okay, so Rayliff approaches Peter. Now, this is interesting because you put it as that she sees some sort of like, just now you were saying that she sees some kind of nobility in him, that he chose, to spare the technarchy suit Glitch, and forego power in that process. And I think you're right. Like that's what we're told so far.
Right.
But like I could very well see this being a sort of like misunderstanding of what she sees in that, you know, because just the previous issue with her, we found out that she was the one that wanted to murder Xanto, like, just outright. Right. You know, so like, I'm wondering if we're going to like, basically open the next issue and turn the page and find out that like her attraction to Peter is based off of something completely that we misread and Peter misread. But for now, let's accept that she is interested in him for some kind of nobility. And that turns up the sort of horny vibes.
I was going to say, is this when we like return to like Seinfeld kind of humor where it's like, I thought she kissed me, but she didn't. I thought she liked my virtue.
Yeah, right. That's it. What did you think of this beat? Because I got some thoughts on this myself.
I mean, it was, in the immortal words of Mark Ginocchio, attached with a rivet gun, Dan. I mean,
yeah,
it just came out of nowhere. And like, look, I'm not really, maybe I'm just feeling generous. I don't know, but I'm not like really ready to like ding the book for it in any kind of meaningful way. But at the same time, it's just like, why are we doing this? Like, I like, and like, I don't even like, I made the joke in the recap about, well, it's not even the same. Like, we're well past like, is Peter truly loyal to Shay here or not? Because like, I don't, like, we might get in the next issue in New York, we might see like Shay is like making out with someone in a bar or something. You know what I mean? Like, that kind of seems to be where we're at with that relationship. So I'm not.
You and I are more loyal to Shay than
so.
Peter is. Because we like her more than Peter does.
I think so. But Shay, and again, like, I'm not trying to justify it. But Shay is even like, well, we're not exclusive. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I mean, she's given him all rights to hook up with aliens.
Yeah, whatever. But like, it's just, and you read the letters page. I don't. So I didn't even see the Niccolo stuff. But like, it does track. I mean, hey, at least we didn't get like candlelight and like, like the pose of Peter.
It's
like,
not, I've been trapped in a bunker since my childhood, and now you're the first male adult, and some cosmic force is causing us to get horny for each other.
Exactly. It's just, two adults just hooking up on a spaceship, I guess, like,
and at least consent is involved this time,
right?
Right. As murky as that might be. I mean, my problem with this, again, I don't want this to be like a sort of like, oh, I'm holding a candle for Shay or MJ or whatever.
Right.
It's more just that, like, I think you even made this joke. I need to re-listen to the podcast of issue 13 when this character was introduced, because I think you even in your recap joked, oh, it's a female character, like someone for Peter to make out with or something like that.
If I did, I don't remember, but it tracks.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, like, man, like, have we had a single female character introduced in this book that doesn't immediately become a love interest for Peter Parker? And maybe that's been true forever in Amazing Spider-Man. Even the one character that like Joe Kelly introduced, why am I forgetting her name right now at the Daily Bugle? Nora
Jones.
Nora Winters.
Sorry, not Nora Jones.
Nora Jones is the singer, but she can show up too. There was a sort of like, will they, won't they, like his girl Friday kind of thing going on there that was never consummated. And I'm glad for that, because I think she's a more fun character for not being a girlfriend of Peter Parker's. And like, I don't know, man, if there was just another female character that was introduced that's explicitly female and wasn't someone that Peter was macking on, I think I'd be much more like open to this. But like, I think we both, again, for the record, I want to go back, but I think we both made a joke about it. And here it is, playing out that way. And I can't really help but kind of like roll my eyes, because it just seems sort of part of the formula at this point.
Yeah.
Which is to say, like, I can't even get invested in any of this stuff, because they're not even trying to be loyal to the one that they were trying to sell us on a year ago, or, you know, just go down the list here. Captain Marvel, for like a hot minute. Then it was
Mockingbird.
Mockingbird. Yeah. I mean, like, come on now. Okay. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get to our grades here. Mark, why don't you get us started on this one?
Yeah, this is a solid B comic for me.
B is exactly where I go. So look at that, right along the same place with us. Cool. Yeah, Peter in Space has turned out to be a lot of fun. You know, we're rapidly approaching, I think we're at the they said in the letters page this, we're at the halfway point of this story. And I mean, like, great, you know, keep moving forward, you know, evolve this, show us something new each issue. But frankly, at this rate, I wouldn't mind hanging out here a little bit longer.
Yeah,
so
I certainly feel like the Peter in Space stories has a little more upward latitude than the New York story right now, but we'll see if they kind of resuscitate that in the next one.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, like they're saying, I think it's going to be like the solicits for February came out, and it's got, you know, Peter returning to Earth or whatever. It's just got him with Hellgate on the cover, so clearly there's going to be some kind of, you know, confrontation or reunion there.
Right.
And boy, like that's kind of a lot of movement for this title, and frankly, very like refreshing. It says we got a lot of ideas, and so we're not banking too much on this one because we're going to keep going to the next one.
Yep.
And frankly, that's, I think, how this book should be. So there's very few ideas that are Superior Spider-Man where you just kind of want to linger in them, and even then, that went on too long.
Yeah.
So you know, good stuff. All right, Mark, why don't you bring us home?
Yeah, so we don't linger too long here. That brings us to the end.
Never.
That brings us to the end of this episode, but we want to thank you, the listeners and viewers, for tuning into this episode of The Amazing Spider Talk. This podcast exists because of the support of our listeners on Patreon, where for only $4.99 a month, the cost of a new comic, you can help support our show's existence while getting early episodes, including these reviews, the same week the comics release, exclusive artwork, and a ton of other bonuses.
Yeah, if you value smart comics criticism and historical analysis, we hope you'll consider supporting us on Patreon. What we do on the show is admittedly niche. Still, if you find our Spider-Man commentary and community valuable, we can only continue doing what we do with your support on Patreon.
Thank you to everyone who supports us in our work, plus an additional thank you to Austin Morales and Frank McCune for upgrading their membership. If you want to join their ranks, please go to AmazingSpiderTalk.com and click the Patreon button to sign up to join our club.
So, Mark, until they introduce a female cast member into the pages of Amazing Spider-Man that isn't instantly a romantic interest for Peter, what's our motto?
Face it, Tiger. With great podcasts, there must also come the Amazing Spider Talk.